Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's presentation. My name is Joseph Turton, and I am delighted to be here with you all to discuss a pivotal subject that is reshaping the way we approach computerized system validation. Today, we'll dive deep into understanding risk-based approaches, focusing on how we can leverage them systematically to ensure that not only the quality of our systems, but that they remain compliant with ever-evolving regulations. This presentation is based on my experiences carrying out computerized system validation over the last 12 years. My background is in good laboratory practice, primarily with CROs. My current position at Vinology is a QA manager with a specialism in CSV. The company aims to help small to medium enterprises with GLP, GCP, and GCLP. These companies usually have limited resources and need to carry out their regulatory work with tight budgets and small team structures. So this presentation may not be the demonstration of the gold standard of the industry, but it still aims to demonstrate the implementation of risk-based approaches to CSV within the real world. I'm looking forward to sharing my insights with you, a case study or two, and best practices. Before we dive into our topic, let's quickly walk through the agenda to give you an overview of today's journey. Firstly, we'll set the foundation by understanding what computerized system validation is, or what CSV is all about. It's essential to understand the core concepts, especially if you're new to the subject. So following that, we'll delve into the significance of adopting a risk-based approach, exploring its nuances and why it's increasingly critical in today's digital landscape. We'll then study the foundational principles of a risk-based CSV. This will arm us with the theoretical knowledge needed to navigate the more practical aspects. Speaking of practicality, we'll then outline a step-by-step guide on how organizations can transition to a risk-centric approach in their CSV processes. However, as with any shift, challenges are bound to arise, and we'll discuss some common obstacles organizations face when implementing this approach. And more importantly, we'll talk about the solutions. To make all of this more tangible, we'll dive into real-world case studies, dissecting the challenges, the solutions, and the outcomes of organizations' journeys with risk-based CSV. Lastly, I'm eager to engage with you all during our Q&A session. It's an opportunity to seek clarification, share experiences, and delve deeper into any particular subject. The introduction to CSV. At its core, CSV is simply a process for documenting that a process is fit for purpose. Simple as that. But we all know in reality that it's more complex. In my experience, people struggle to understand what needs to be subject to computerized system validation. So the first hurdle is understanding the definition. I found that this visual representation is the best definition, at least for my brain. And on the left-hand side, you have a computer system, which is the combination of software, hardware, and any critical firmware. And on the right-hand side, you have a controlled process. This is a combination of equipment, so it could be a HPLC, a GCMS, and then you have the operating procedures and personnel. This last part, the operating procedures and personnel, I think is often overlooked during the validation process. You need to remember that the point of a validation is to demonstrate that your process is fit for purpose, it's fit for your purpose. So if you don't include the operating procedures and personnel within the validation activities, then you aren't demonstrating that it's fit for your purpose. Some questions you can ask yourself when considering what needs validation are you using the system for a regulated process, such as a clinical trial, laboratory testing, or manufacturing operation? If the answer to that is yes, then you're going to need some CSV. Are you using the system for processing and storing data regulated by the regulations? Yes, then you're going to need some kind of computerized system validation. Is the system critical to your products or the process quality or safety? The answer is yes, then you're going to need some kind of computerized system validation. And the last one, does the system have the potential to impact the accuracy, reliability, and the integrity of regulated data? If the answer to that is yes, then you're going to need some kind of computerized system validation. There's more questions you can ask yourself, but those are just a few. The purpose and benefits. So let's briefly discuss the purpose and benefits of CSV. So why do we invest in CSV? The primary aim is to ensure that our systems are dependable, produce consistent outcomes, protect sensitive data, and enhance the overall system quality. CSV should add value. It shouldn't be something that's a checkboxing exercise to satisfy the auditors. Additionally, it helps businesses align with international standards, reducing potential risks associated with the system malfunctions or data compromises. And all this is achieved by creating a predetermined set of requirements for a system or process. This part, in my mind, is the hardest part of CSV, but I'll talk about that later. Understanding which regulations are necessary is essential to anyone within our industry, but it's more critical to those who carry out CSV, as the different authorities have subtle different requirements, and the different GXPs have different inherent risks, and therefore need different approaches. So for those in the US, or for those who submit to the FDA, will be familiar with 21 CFR Part 11, which focuses on electronic records and signatures. GAMP has also released a new edition in the past year. For those who can afford it, it's an excellent example of the best practices and can help guide organisations when developing your own CSV approach. In Europe, we have EMA's Annex 11, and the EMA have recently released new guidance for computer systems within clinical trials, which came into effect about a month or so ago. It's definitely worth the read for those that work in GCP or GCLP. And for those that work in GLP, the OECD has released new guidance relevant to CSV. OECD 22, which focuses on data integrity and their expectations. In addition to that, OECD 17 Supplement 1 has been released recently, which is some good bedtime reading for anyone who needs to validate a process which involves cloud-based infrastructure. That's just a few, but there's been a lot of regulatory shift in the last few years. So the importance of a risk-based approach is what we'll discuss next. When we look at the technical landscape today, it's evident that our systems are no longer simple. We're talking sophisticated platforms incorporating various technologies, often with overlapping functionalities. These intricacies, while beneficial, bring with it an array of challenges. The more complex the system, the more potential there is for unexpected risks or failures. Regulatory bodies have taken note of this growing complexity. They recognise that the old process-centric paradigm, where every component underwent rigorous validation, irrespective of its role or risk, is no longer tenable. And today there's more of a dynamic approach expected. Regulators are increasingly leaning towards risk-centric models, allowing organisations to focus on parts of their system, and like the ones that, if they were to fail, would they pose a significant risk? Those are the bits you need to worry about the most. Adopting a risk-based approach is not just about meeting regulatory requirements, it's about intelligent and efficient system validation. By pinpointing and addressing the most crucial areas, we can ensure our resources, that both time and money, are used optimally. This kind of strategic focus not only bolsters system reliability, but it also instills greater confidence to stakeholders, ensuring that the most pertinent risks are being addressed. The principles of risk-based CSV. So let's discuss the principles. There are guidance documents which can provide advice on assessing risk in regulated environments, but ICH-Q9 guideline is a cornerstone of any kind of risk-based approach in the pharmaceutical sector, and by extension to CSV. It provides a robust framework, emphasising the need for methodological processes when it comes to managing risks. So when we talk about aligning our CSV processes with a risk-based approach, and the ICH-Q9 is a great tool that provides necessary processes from well-established guidance. It's key to any approach. When you're developing an approach to CSV and a risk-based CSV, using the right guidance to help you is key. So the heart of a risk-based CSV lies in 3 core stages. Firstly, we identify. This is where we list potential risks associated with our system. Next, we assess. Here we gauge the probability and the impact of the risks, asking questions like, how likely is this to occur? What's the potential fallout? And finally, control. This is the action phase. Based on our assessment, we implement mitigations or completely remove identified risks. Risk-based CSV isn't a one and done deal. Systems evolve, technologies advance, and correspondingly, the risk landscape shifts. And continuous monitoring ensures that we're always looking out for emerging risks. And periodic reviews are crucial to a risk-based approach. There are check-ins. They ensure that our mitigation strategies still hold water and we can adapt them as necessary. The first step in any risk management strategy is to recognise where things can go wrong. This means diving deep into our system architecture, understanding every node, every transition point, every potential human interface. It's about asking the what if questions. What if the server fails? What if an unexpected input is entered here? By charting out these scenarios, we're setting the stage for a robust risk assessment. Not all systems are created equally. Some are critical, some directly impact the product quality or patient safety, while others, though important, might not have the same immediate implications. Recognizing this distinction lets us prioritize our validation efforts, ensuring that the highest risk areas are addressed first. It's a matter of channeling our resources where they're needed the most. You can break this down even further into critical and non-critical requirements for a system, which can allow you to focus your testing even further. Risk identification isn't a solo task. It requires a village, so to speak. By bringing in stakeholders from different departments, from IT experts who understand the technicalities, to users who interact with the system daily, we can obtain a 365-degree view of potential risks. Everyone sees the system from a different angle, and by consolidating these views, we ensure that no stone is left unturned. So types of risk assessment, this is a big one. Once we've identified potential risks, we must assess them. This assessment can be quantitative, using numbers and probabilities, like calculating the chance of a system failure in a given year. This approach is excellent for understanding the risk for systems and processes, especially if they have many purposes or a wide scope, such as a LIMS system. Also, the approach is key for effective continuous monitoring or periodic reviews. The numerical outcomes can be associated with low, medium, and high risks, which can aid with determining the review periods. On the other hand, you've got qualitative risk assessment, which is more descriptive and relies heavily on expert opinions and hypothetical scenarios. Both methods have their merits, and often they're used in tandem to provide a comprehensive picture. There are several tools at our disposal for this phase. The failure modes and effects analysis model, or FMEA, for instance, allows us to break down potential failures, understanding their origins, and gauging their consequences. It's a structured approach that's been invaluable to numerous industries. Meanwhile, risk matrices offer a visual representation of risks, where the risk stands in terms of their severity and their likelihood. And at a glance, that means we can determine whether risks warrant immediate attention. It's crucial to remember that not all risks are created equal. Some might have catastrophic consequences, but are extremely rare, while others might occur more frequently but have minimal impact. By ranking risks based on these factors, we can create a hierarchy, guiding us on where to focus our risk control measures. There are many tools you can use to understand risk in many scenarios, but the key is to understand the available tools and pick up the best ones that suit you, your organization, and the approach that you're going to take. Once we've identified our risks, the next logical step is to control them. This is where risk mitigation strategies come into play. We could introduce redundancies to safeguard against failures, or implement software patches to address known vulnerabilities. You can have training programs, on the other hand, that can reduce mitigation factors that stem from human error. Each risk might warrant a unique control. It should be tailored to its nature and its implications. The key to a good risk control is continuously checking and understanding if your mitigation strategies are working, whether they're practical and fit for purpose. Regular reviews of mitigations allow you to understand if you're becoming impractical as your business changes. Say your business is going through more studies or more trials than ever. Are the mitigation strategies that you put into place when you were a smaller organisation, they might not be appropriate anymore. So the reviews give you scope to change them. But how do we know what is an acceptable level of risk? This is where acceptance criteria comes into the picture. These criteria are based on a mix of regulatory guidelines, industry best practices, and our own internal policies. This should serve as a benchmark. They help us gauge whether a risk is post-mitigation is within acceptable limits, or if it needs further controls. It's hard to give examples of what is appropriate acceptance criteria. It should be relevant to your business area, but understanding what is acceptable is something that lots of us do naturally anyways. It's kind of a gut feeling. When we begin to understand risks, we think, does this make me feel more confident in the system, or does it make me feel uncomfortable? So these are the things you should consider when you're defining your acceptance criteria. It's one thing to implement risk control, but how do we identify its effectiveness? This is where testing and verification methods come in, whether through simulated test cases or real-world trials or continuous monitoring. We must validate that our risk controls work as intended. It's the final check, ensuring that we're not blindly trusting our measures, but actually verifying their efficacy. Verifying that the mitigation strategies you've put into place are appropriate and are commensurate to the risk is critical to load balancing the level of effort you need when validating and maintaining your validations going forward. So risk isn't static. As our systems evolve, so do the risk landscape. This is where periodic reviews are crucial. They're an opportunity to revisit our risk profiles, ensuring that they're still relevant. Maybe a software update has introduced new vulnerabilities, or perhaps previous risks that we've identified no longer pose a threat. Through regular reviews, we can keep our risk strategies updated and aligned with the current state of our systems. There are several ways to establish periodic system reviews, but these two have worked well for me. So scheduled reassessments. The majority of new guidelines released over the last few years has required some form of periodic assessment or scheduled predetermined reassessment for systems. Is simply the best way to meet this requirement and maintaining validated systems. I would recommend using the outcome of the risk assessments we discussed earlier, such as the outcome of a numerical assessment, and then use this assessment to determine the reassessment frequency. So some systems need more frequent attention and some won't. While schedules assessments are kind of proactive, they're triggered. They're proactive. Triggered reviews are reactive, initiated by specific events. Imagine we implement a major system upgrade, or heaven forbid we face a security breach. Such significant events can alter our risk profiles dramatically, so triggered reviews ensure that we respond swiftly, assessing the new landscape and implement new necessary controls. It's about being agile and responsive, ensuring that we're never caught off guard. This can be managed by change control within a regulatory environment, or whenever you want it internally. So change control. Any change, whether it's a minor software patch or a major system overhaul, can have ripple effects on our risk profile. Our change control procedures ensure that we navigate these modifications methodically. Every change should be documented, evaluated for its potential risks and the impact, and validated to ensure that it doesn't inadvertently introduce new vulnerabilities or issues. It's about maintaining compliance even as we evolve. I could talk about change control and its implementation for a whole session, but ensure you have a structured process for managing modifications to systems once they're in operation. This process needs to document the change, evaluate the possible risk, and any possible impacts of the change, and then carry out any kind of testing or validation as necessary. Let's talk about the practical steps now. Let's go through an overview of the practical steps. As we all know, computerized system validation is a complex beast, but I'll run through some basic steps to implement risk-based approaches within your validation process. The first step in any validation activity is to generate detailed and unambiguous requirements. This is the step that I've found that most people struggle with. They struggle to lay out their expectations of a process before they have it in place, or the right requirements around a piece of equipment they want, and then they wonder why the system doesn't work in the way they wanted it to. My advice for generating requirement specifications is to think about what you would define as a failure, so or not being successful, and then translate this into a testable pass-fail binary requirement or requirements, and then you can break your requirements down as far as you need. You don't have to have one primary requirement and have it really ambiguous. When people generate requirements, they often get stuck in the technical detail of what they want the piece of equipment to do, when in reality, they should be focused on the data lifecycle as a whole. And with the move to electronic data, you need to shift your focus on the requirements of managing the data throughout the whole process, say from sample receipt to destruction and the process that you have internally, rather than just say, oh, I need a PCR machine to do X, or I need a chromatography data system that can inject large volumes. There's more to it than that. So in dissecting system classifications, we must consider the laboratory is a complex organism. So each system has a role, and with some of them being vital for survival and others kind of are used for optimal performance. So you can categorize your systems into different types. So you've got critical systems, so like HPLC data systems are akin to the heart of operations. Any risk here could lead to catastrophic potentially leading to patient harm or regulatory compliance. You can have non-critical systems. They don't have to have the same kind of immediate impact. This kind of support our critical systems. Think of these as kind of the ones that deliver necessary resources, like trained staff, or kind of the things that ensure the vitality of your operations, rather than things that can have direct impact on patient or product safety. Lastly, there are non-GXP systems that can be kind of supporting the infrastructure of the lab. They interact with the heart. They don't interact with the kind of the heart of the system directly. Say an inventory management system for everyday consumables kind of underlies the importance of smooth operations, ensuring that there's no materials missing and you don't lose things. But it's not going to cause a massive impact if it doesn't work properly necessarily. By precisely categorizing our systems, we create a map of our kind of laboratory, allowing us to focus our efforts on maintaining the vital operations and ensuring that our resources are wisely invested. So with our systems classified, we dive into risk assessment. So this involves evaluating potential ramifications if a system were to fail. A system that, if compromised, could result in patient harm or degrade product quality would rank high on the list. An example would be, say, a system that monitors and controls pH levels during drug formulation processes. If this fails, the pH imbalance could compromise drug efficacy or safety. Consequently, a failure in this could have severe repercussions for patient health. We can use qualitative and quantitative methods that we discussed earlier to determine the severity and potential of failures and their likelihood. So an example of qualitative assessment, say through expert consultation, we might understand that a failure in our lab's equipment calibration system won't directly affect patient harm, but could delay drug releases, resulting in financial and reputational impacts. Hence why the risk might not be high, it's undoubtedly moderate. Quantitative assessment, so for critical systems like ones that manage, say, real-time vital signs for patients during clinical trials, we might employ statistics, so a numerical assessment. So suppose the historical data shows that the system has a 0.1% chance of failure, and every failure has a 10% probability of resulting in adverse effects on a patient. In that case, we can quantify the risk and prioritize accordingly. This ensures our resources are directed at mitigating the most impactful risks first. So with our systems classified and the risk assessed, the next step is to chart our validation strategy. It's essential to remember that one size doesn't fit all. So depending on the nature and the gravity of the risks we've identified, a system strategy needs to be tailored. While a system could be GXP critical, might require an exhaustive validation plan, and non-GXP system might require a lighter touch. The key is flexibility. Our strategy should adapt to unique needs of each system and be scalable, ready to evolve with changing requirements. The key is to document a level of expected documentation in your overall kind of validation procedures to ensure that the level of documentation is consistent, well thought out, before carrying out any validation activities. So the next step is planning. Planning is essential for execution. And as we put our validation tests into action, our primary focus remains on the high risk areas. This is where our earlier efforts in classification and assessment bear fruit. By concentrating our efforts on the critical zones, we ensure that our systems are robust and where they need to be, and safeguard product quality and patient safety. The thing to remember is when executing the validation is to document your testing correctly and treat it like a trial or the study data. And the process doesn't end once we've executed our validation tests. Risk management is a continuous endeavour. As our systems evolve, so do the risk landscapes. So regular reviews and continuous monitoring, we can stay on top of these changes. This isn't just about catching and managing risks as they emerge. It's about being proactive, anticipating changes and adapting before issues arise. So challenges and solutions. One of the first challenges that we often encounter is resistance to change. It's an inherent human trait to find comfort in familiarity. When we talk about moving from traditional validation methods to a risk-based approach, there are legitimate concerns, like will this disrupt our existing process? How steep will the learning curve be? It's vital to address these concerns head on, emphasising the long-term benefits and offering training to kind of ease the transition. Another significant hurdle is the potential misalignment between IT and quality systems and operations. While IT might prioritise system functionality and performance, quality will probably be laser focused on compliance and patient safety. The priorities aren't at odds, but they do require alignment. Cross-functional workshops, regular communication, and shared objectives can help bridge the gap, ensuring that both teams work in tandem towards a common goal. Lastly, there's a perception challenge. So some stakeholders might believe that a risk-based approach is a shortcut, a way to cut corners. It's crucial to dispel this myth. Risk-based doesn't mean less rigorous. It means being more focused with our rigour. It's about channeling our resources and efforts where they matter most, ensuring that our systems are robust in areas of the highest importance. To address concerns and dispel myths, a concerted educational effort is key. We need to proactively engage our stakeholders, whether they're upper management, peers, or the teams under us. Workshops and training sessions can break down the mechanics of risk-based CSV. Tongue-tied there. Real-world case studies can illustrate its tangible benefits. Additionally, by highlighting how regulatory bodies endorse and advocate this approach, we can assuage concerns and about compliance. Our risk-based approach to be effective, or for our risk-based approach to be effective, IT and quality must operate hand in hand along with operations. We must establish regular cross-functional meetings. Both teams can discuss priorities, share insights, and resolve issues. Introducing joint objectives and KPIs can ensure that people are aligned. Furthermore, kind of adopting collaborative platforms where communications can be more seamless, effective, can break down any silos. The beauty of a risk-based approach lies in its adaptability. It's not a rigid framework, but a flexible methodology tailor-made for the dynamic world we live in. We should demonstrate that our approach allows us to quickly adjust to new information, systems, or regulatory updates. Instead of being reactive, it allows us to be proactive, anticipating risks and addressing them before they become real issues. So now let's talk about the reality of implementing this type of risk-based approach. I will run through 2 case studies and discuss the situation, the challenges, the solutions implemented, and the outcomes, along with the relevant lessons and key takeaways. So let's dive into the real-world example of GLP Corp. I would say all these are fictional scenarios. Well, the companies are fictional, but the scenarios are real. So GLP Corp is a leader in diagnostic laboratory space. It faced the challenges of handling ever-increasing sample volumes as their organisation grew and developed, and ensuring kind of the precise data management that they needed. So they decided to deploy an advanced LIMS system. So the roadblock for GLP Corp, the one they faced, was a daunting validation process. They used traditional methods normally. Validating the LIMS would span approximately 9 months, pulling significant manpower and potentially delaying the system's implementation. I think this is a challenge that we've all faced in CSV, is the traditional approach taking far too long. So GLP Corp understood that their existing approach to CSV was causing delays and recognised that they needed to change. They decided to strategically implement a risk-based approach to streamline the LIMS validation. The LIMS functionalities were meticulously classified into critical and non-critical categories. So critical functionalities such as sample management, data integrity, report generation were given the utmost priority due to their impact on compliance and quality control. On the flip side, functionalities like user interface enhancements or notification preferences were classified as non-critical. These elements, while enhancing the system's usability, didn't have direct influence on data accuracy or regulatory compliance. Once they classified the functionalities, GLP Corp allocated 75% of the resource to critical functionalities, ensuring that they were thoroughly tested and compliant, while the remaining 25% of the resources were smartly utilised to validate the non-critical functionalities. The aim was not to overlook these aspects, but to kind of validate them more efficiently, saving time without compromising quality. This shift to a risk-based approach to CSV resulted in a remarkable reduction, a 40% reduction in overall validation time. GLP Corp was able to ensure that every function was validated in depth, and the scrutiny was tailored based on the level of criticality. It's essential to, in essence, GLP Corp strategically went through the kind of thoughtful weights and balance, ensuring that every function underwent validation, though the resources were meticulously optimized. Yeah, so the results, I think I covered a bit that in the other one. Remarkable efficiency. They successfully implemented the LIMS in just under 6 months. That's a 3-month time saving. They also optimized their resources, saving personnel for the validation, and most importantly, they didn't compromise quality. The risk-based approach meant that the higher areas of importance underwent deeper validation, and they ensured a higher level of data integrity. So the key takeaways: GLP Corp's journey underscores the value of being flexible and using a risk-based approach. It's a testament to how we can achieve efficiency without sacrificing quality. And as an added advantage, this approach positions companies like GLP Corp to swiftly and safely adopt future technologies, ensuring that they remain at the forefront of innovation. So we'll now explore another application of risk-based approaches, but this time in a GCP environment. So walking through a journey of GCP Solutions, a clinical research organization. So GCP Solutions was on the brink of deploying a new CTMS. However, the dark cloud of a lengthy traditional validation process kind of loomed over, threatening to take a year and tie up vital resources, potentially causing significant delays in ongoing and upcoming clinical trials. So the solution. So GCP Solutions had to transform a CSV process by categorizing the modules into critical and non-critical segments. For instance, functionalities like patient data management or regulatory submissions were identified as critical as they directly impacted patient safety and compliance. On the other hand, elements like user interface customizations and again notification settings were deemed not critical, while they enhance the user's kind of interaction. Their failure wouldn't jeopardize the regulatory compliance or impact the data integrity. Once the categorization was clear, GCP Solutions strategically allocated the resources. They dedicated the majority of their efforts to approximately 70% towards validating their critical modules. This ensures that no stone was left unturned when it came to compliance and patient safety. The remaining 30% of the resources were assigned to the non-critical modules, and by doing so, they streamlined the validation process without compromising quality. So this risk-based approach for them was transformative. By focusing in the right areas, GCP Solutions managed to cut down the validation time by 30% and making the process not only more efficient, but thoroughly compliant. So some of the outcomes. Yeah, so the time spent was cut down by a third, allowing for a quicker deployment of a system, also ensuring no compromise in the critical functionalities or the patient safety or regulatory standards. The kind of resource savings was quite significant from the prioritization of their efforts. They saved a third of their manpower, which would otherwise have been engaged in an extensive validation process. So think of the important things that those people are doing instead of validations. And I guess most importantly, there was no compliance issues post implementation, indicating kind of the robustness of this kind of approach. So the agility introduced by a risk-based approach meant that making updates and scaling up became less cumbersome, enhancing the system and allowing it to be more adaptable and ensuring that they can swiftly make changes. So the key lessons and takeaways from GCP Solutions. GCP Solutions experience underscores the agility instilled by a risk-based approach. It's not about cutting corners, it's about intelligent focus, a critical thinking, ensuring that throughout the validation process, the resources were optimized and compliance wasn't sacrificed. They concentrated their attention on critical areas and actually enhancing the regulatory adherence and their overall equality. So as we wrap up our discussion, it's essential to emphasize or re-emphasize the importance of the shift towards risk-based approaches in CSV. With the ever-evolving intricacies within our industries, we cannot remain tethered to old, rigid methodologies. The case studies have kind of showcased that the flexibility and adaptability powered by a risk-centric view can drive success, where optimizing resources in a crucial way is a key takeaway, rather than spreading ourselves too thin with risk-based CSV. It allows us to channel our efforts, time, and our resources into areas that demand the most attention, allowing for maximum efficiency. We cannot ignore the role that this approach plays in enhancing compliance. With focused validation strategies, we don't just meet, but often exceed regulatory expectations, ensuring product safety and quality. And lastly, let's not forget the essence of continuous improvement. Risk-based approaches isn't just kind of a one and done deal. It's encouraging periodic reviews and updates, ensuring that our systems remain compliant and at the pinnacle of operational compliance. Q&A.
Well, yes, Q&A, Joseph, but first the poll. And let me thank you for this informative session. And so you can participate with the poll by scanning the QR code, and also don't hesitate to put your questions in the Q&A box below the video player. So the first question, Joseph, you established, on a scale from 1 to 5, how mature do you believe your organization's current approach is towards risk-based computerized system validation? 1 being not at all mature and 5 very mature.
That's interesting.
Well, we'll have to wait because the votes are still coming in, but quite a diversity now.
Yeah.
So 5 is very mature and 1 is not at all mature.
We're kind of
Well,
jumping
most of the-
between either end of the spectrum there, aren't we?
Yeah, indeed. Oh, they are very mature organizations.
That's good.
Nice to see that.
It
But
is
there's
indeed.
still a lot of room for improvement.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's always room for improvement. I guess that's the primary principle, isn't it?
Indeed. Indeed. We are waiting a few moments more to have all the votes coming in. But I guess the trend is here in the middle.
Yeah, everyone's kind of 50-50, I guess, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Always a
interesting.
safe it's always a safe choice, obviously, to say in the middle.
Yeah, I guess no one wants to admit that they're not that far ahead.
Yeah.
But it's good.
All
It's
right. So let's move on to the second question. Okay. Which of the following is your organization's biggest challenge when considering a shift to a risk-based CSV approach? Resistance to change, lack of knowledge and training, perceived costs, uncertainty about regulatory, it has moved, acceptance, or others? Okay, lack of knowledge and training.
It's shifting again. It's quite fun to watch, actually.
You didn't expect this?
No, I think I expected the lack of knowledge and training to be up there on the top. Although I think
Okay.
to be fair, number two, the resistance to change is the one I found that probably most people have, as well as the training. So it's interesting.
Yeah. Well, resistance to change has often to do with fear, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah, it's lack of understanding, which I guess are probably related to each other.
The more you know, the less fear you have, the less resistance to change.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah,
I guess, are really linked.
absolutely. Still, votes are coming in, but indeed, those two remain on the top. All right. Well, as we have done this poll, thanks everyone for voting. Now we can move to the Q&A. Let's see. I think it's here. Yeah. Mabel Colon is asking, do you think the life science industry is ready for the transition from CSV to CSA?
Well, yes, I think it is. I think it needs to be ready. I think it needs to kind of drop the kind of old school approach that it takes to CSV or CSA, whatever you want to call it. To me, they're kind of it's just a new name for the same thing. If you apply a risk-based approach, and I think it is, and it needs to be to kind of keep up with the times and to develop properly.
Yeah. All right. Stan van den Bergmortel is asking, what do you believe are the first steps organizations have to take to embrace a CSA approach as part of their CSV activities?
Well, I think the poll kind of alluded to the answer to that question. I think it's training, and I think it's understanding, well, one, what the differences are and how they improve efficiencies and things like that, and what you actually need to do in reality, and understanding how you can measure risk. Because if you Google risk management approaches, there's 1,001 ways to manage it, and I think getting understanding of that and how you can apply that within your organization, yeah.
Okay. Another question from Kaumadi, Vitana. When implementing a new computerized system or software platform, if you have limited knowledge about the functionality to start with, how would you go about taking a risk-based approach for CSV?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And I think part of this is one, I guess, thinking about what you want up front, regardless of what system you've already got. I know quite a lot of people have already bought these things and then they're bringing them in. But try and think about what you're actually trying to achieve before you kind of look at your system. And then the other part is having your conversations with your vendor and asking them the right questions and getting that understanding. Because they're the experts in the system in terms of its technicalities and how it works and what it can do. So having those kind of upfront conversations with the people that are selling you the software or the system is kind of the easiest way to start with, and try and have an unbiased kind of approach when you're having these conversations.
Yeah, all right. Or asking for references. Maybe that's also.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah,
Yeah.
lots of companies say that they've implemented these in other situations or in regulatory environments, and it's definitely worth asking whether they can provide you with contact to talk to.
Yeah, all right. Manon de Kooijer. Thanks, Manon, for participating so intensively in the Q&A. We really like it. So Manon is asking, how do I convince top management to improve computerized system validation, as long as we do not have any external audit non-conformities?
It's a very good question, and I think it kind of we alluded to that a bit in the presentation. I think it's discussing how it can save time and money, and I think that's kind of the conversation that hits kind of management the easiest. It's the easiest metric to measure, and if you say you can save time, and therefore you can save money, and your staff can be doing something else instead, then I don't see a management structure that's not going to be like, well, let's make the change, because who doesn't want to save time and money? It's kind of converting your
Absolutely.
language to something that management can understand, rather than focusing on the quality aspects.
All right, that's clear. Time and money. Kaumadi Vitana again. At what stage should the risk assessment be done to establish the scope of the CSV needed for a new system?
As early as possible. So if you're bringing a new system in, I'd say before you've bought it, ideally. So try and get the most understanding you can about the system and how you use it. But normally, most people have kind of already purchased a piece of software, or it's something that's a kind of a change in scope. So yeah, as early as possible in the validation process to understand what the key parts are and where to focus.
Okay, that's clear also. How can organizations ensure they aren't cutting corners with a risk-based approach?
Well, I think that is based on how you assess risk, really. So having a kind of an unbiased, established approach of following the proper guidelines, and picking the right tools for assessing risk is the best way to make sure you're kind of unbiased and not just skipping over the important parts. Because if you write a proper risk assessment and you highlight the important parts and highlight the not important parts, there's no way around it. You can't kind of skip over and you can't cut corners then.
Okay, that's clear too. Let's see any other question. Yes, another one. From the case study we discussed, which element do you believe is most translatable to most organizations, regardless of size or sector?
I'd say the kind of the most translatable element is the kind of the structured approach to risk identification and management. It's a thing that's used kind of globally. How you assess risk isn't just related to regulatory environments. You use it across the globe in different sectors. So I think the most translatable elements are the ones that are related to risk identification and assessments. Every sector kind of evaluates potential failure points and understands them and categorizes them. And it's kind of there's lots of universally acceptable forms and the kind of the foundation of any risk-based CSV process, really.
Right. Um, let's see. All right. How do you think future regulations changes might affect the adoption of risk-based CSV approaches?
Well, I think the regulatory changes we've seen over the last few years have all kind of focused on risk-based approaches. And I think that it's only going to get more risk-centric. It's only going to focus more on risk. Um, so I think future changes are probably going to force people to kind of adopt a more risk-based approach, rather than at the moment you've kind of got this in between. They're kind of suggesting risk-based approaches or discussing risk management activities and techniques, and I think they're going to get more focused on ensuring that you're taking a proper risk-based approach rather than just the one size fits all and black box it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Um, Another question from Angelica Paluk. What is your opinion? Who should be responsible for creating system risk assessment QA or IT QA, or maybe both of them?
Yeah, I think I alluded to this in the presentation as well. I think it's a shared responsibility. In it's everyone needs to work together because everyone has different kind of viewpoints and understands different risks differently, and will have kind of they come from different points of view. And I think as well, this needs to come from kind of operations as well. It's not just kind of the QA or your IT departments. You need to get the people that are actually using these systems involved because they're the people that are more likely to say cause human errors or run into issues and challenges and that are likely to be impacted. By I guess people doing things wrong and understanding the risk more will help them as well. So it's a team effort. Everyone has to be involved.
Yes, that's also what we heard yesterday. So, hear the same message. Absolutely. All right, I think we handled all the questions. Our time's up. So, I would like to thank you again, Joseph, and I wish you a very good continuation of your day. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, everyone. Much appreciated.
Bye.
Bye.